This episode is proudly supported by Anchor Food Professionals. Whether you're a caterer, cafe operator, or chef running a commercial kitchen, everyone knows quality products are the foundation of successful dishes. Anchor Food Professionals is a trusted supplier to the hospitality industry and has built a stellar reputation thanks to their consistently excellent butter, cream, and cheese. As the food service business of Fonterra, Anchor Food Professionals is home to many well-known brands such as Perfect Italiano, Mainland, Western Star, and Bega, and is now an important part of the Australian food service sector. Anchor Food Professionals has a history of innovation and expertise in sustainable dairying that delivers a world-class product portfolio. If quality cheese, cream, and butter are important to your creations, head to anchorfp.com.au to explore the range.
This career in general, it plays into my ADD perfectly, and I guess that's why I sort of, why the industry is made up with a lot of people with that. It can take your focus from one thing to another instantaneously and then back to something else. It's constantly moving. There's never really a dull moment.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. We've seen a renaissance of the brasserie down under, but what does a modern brasserie look like, and has Australia shaped its own version of it? Doug Keyte is the executive chef of Naldham House in Brisbane, Queensland. Doug, how are you?
Good, thanks. Yourself?
I'm good. It's good to get you on the show. You've got a pretty big, busy venue there. How are things going at the moment?
Yeah, it's good. It's picking up. It's obviously that, time of year, the season. Everyone wants to get out for their Christmas parties and whatnot. So, yeah, it's coming along quite nicely.
We've had a few guests on from Brisbane of late, and they sort of say that things have been pretty good all year, and yet a lot of around Australia, some of the restaurants have been struggling with the economic times. What's the year been like for you?
It's been I guess an interesting one. Obviously, I started the year down in Melbourne. I came up mid-year to join this project. We opened mid-July, so we've been going for up to 4 months now. So it's been, with a new restaurant opening, it's been building and, just improving on where it's been. But you can obviously see a lot of things happening around us. So it's interesting to see how the Brisbane scene is operating at the moment. It's definitely a lot different to when I was up here last time.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because the evolution in Brisbane's been pretty amazing. How much change have you seen?
Oh, incredible. I started my apprenticeship on the Gold Coast back in 2003, and watching how the Queensland dining scene's changed since 2003 to where it is now, it's not even comparable.
You mentioned that you came up from Melbourne. How different is it sort of running a restaurant and cooking in Brisbane to Melbourne? A
restaurant's a restaurant in some respects, but it's a lot to do with the chefs that you can get in there. I'm finding probably my main difficulty is the amount of chefs in Brisbane, or career-driven chefs. Most people who come up here tend to want to get out. It still has that country town vibe, regardless of the fact that there are, a lot of good restaurants up here now. And I had that same feeling, and I can't blame anyone for that. It's, you want to get out into the bigger cities and where a lot of hype is. Sydney and Melbourne, there's a lot of hype there, and then a lot of chefs choose to go overseas.
How do you deal with that shortfall?
Training, I guess. It has been hard. We've gone through a number of chefs to start off with, but we've sort of really, I think, nutted down our team now. We've got a pretty solid core. And then, working with the guys we have, anyone who has experience, we lean on them with training for the more junior guys.
Tell us a little bit about Naldham House. You mentioned it opened earlier this year, but it's got a couple of different levels. Tell us what you're doing.
So on the ground floor, we have brasserie. It was originally split in two. We had the brasserie and terrace, both about 100 seats. We had two separate menus, a snack menu for the terrace. It was aimed more towards drinking, and the inside was more traditional brasserie fare. But we found a lot of people wanted to sit outside and have the brasserie menu, and vice versa. People wanted to sit inside and still get the snacks menu. So we've combined the menus, and now we have a 200-seat brasserie.
That's a big restaurant. Give us a sense of what a modern brasserie looks like, what you guys are doing.
We're trying to incorporate, I guess, as much as we can. The owners use the term pan-Euro. We're trying to incorporate different flavors, different dishes from, around Europe, not specifically focusing on French fare, but there is still a little bit of that in there. But yeah, it's not specifically anything in particular. We're more trying to, I guess, the idea is we want to work with the seasons for the menus and whatnot, work with suppliers, and it's not something where 4 months in we've really nutted out 100% yet, but we're definitely putting down the groundwork to get there.
And it's certainly pretty hot up there in Queensland, and as such, there's different produce that you get there. Does that sort of play a role in sort of shaping what the brasserie is?
It will in time. Like I said, there's not a lot that we've been able to do with that just at this stage. It's been the mad rush of getting open and moving through staff and whatnot. But as we start to settle now and moving into the new year, that's definitely something that I want to, be getting out there onto the farms, meeting producers and whatnot. That's something that's very important to me.
What's it been like this year? You moved to Queensland and opening a restaurant. What's some of the sort of challenges and wins that you had in getting it all together and up and running?
I'd say the biggest challenge for this one was the short period of time. I only had a few weeks once I got up here to actually write the menu, test everything out, do the trials, find the team, train everybody up. It was wild. It was definitely an experience. When we opened Grill Americano, we had all of the last lockdown to really trial everything and sort it all out, so that we had plenty of time. That was great. But this was definitely an experience and a challenge with that. But we got there, we got it done. And yeah, it's been very rewarding. This is the first restaurant that I've actually run where I've had full control of the menu, and actually being able to see all my food going out off the pass this time. It's been really rewarding.
Yeah, well, tell us about that, because we will get into sort of the amazing restaurants that you have worked at, but sending out your own food sort of for the first time. What sort of impact has that had on you? And is there a dish or two that kind of speaks of sort of what you're doing?
I wouldn't say there's a dish in particular that really speaks to what I'm doing. It's more, I guess, with the restaurants that I've been involved in previously, very hands-on owners, which I don't have a problem with. I actually really appreciate people who are that passionate about what they're doing. But it takes away from the creative aspect of why I believe most of us are in this job. So it was really important to me. After 21 years, I have a lot of my own ideas and whatnot that I want to see put out there. And, you don't really know if you can even do it until you test it. And I didn't want to burn out of the industry at some stage, never actually knowing if I could be that guy. So I had to take that step. I had to put my own food on the plate and be judged from that and sort of see what the reaction is. And it's been really good so far. I'm enjoying it.
What sort of impact has it had on you personally, having that opportunity and then seeing the fruits of that with guests enjoying it? Has it had an impact on you?
It's very rewarding, but I'm finding it a lot easier to actually go out and interact with guests. It was something that I was never really comfortable with, going out into the dining room. If it wasn't 100% my food, I felt like a bit of a fraud, to be honest. But now it's really opened me up. I'm really enjoying it.
That's extraordinary. Well, you did mention Grill Americano, but take us back to when you were young. Whereabouts did you grow up, and did food play a big role in your life?
So I actually grew up on the Central Coast in New South Wales. And I had my grandparents, they're Hungarian. They owned a acreage out in the Blue Mountains. And I used to spend most of my school holidays out there with them. I was a bit of a naughty boy, so my parents wanted to ship me off to my grandparents' place. Um, but it was incredible. My grandparents grew up on farms in Hungary, and that was their retirement dream, the acreage in the Blue Mountains. And my pop was an incredible gardener. He had an orchard. He had, all these fruit and veg gardens. He had chickens, geese, pigs, sheep, all the, the dream of when you retire for most chefs. That's what I grew up with, and I had a very early insight into that, which has shaped me today with the house that I ended up buying in Melbourne with my partner. And the first thing I did is I tore up all the trees I didn't like, and I planted 16 fruit trees, because for me, that's important for my son to grow up with that sort of, he doesn't have to grow up to be a chef, but he needs to understand food and how important it is.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But yeah, so I guess with that, my grandmother's cooking and whatnot, or the traditional Hungarian fare played a big part. But at an early age, that wasn't something I was looking at, a career in food. I was a party boy. I wanted to be the rock star. I wanted all that sort of stuff. I wanted to be creative that way. But you learn pretty quickly that that's not a career that you're going to be able to pursue. So you've got to look at other things. And I fell into cooking almost accidentally, but I fell in with a group of apprentices. There was 5 of us and a couple of UK expats who were really passionate, and I just fell in love with it straight away, actually being able to see creativity in a different way. And it grew from there.
Where was that first step into the industry? Tell us about your apprenticeship. Do you have any stories of what it was like?
So I actually started out with SeaWorld doing events and whatnot. They were large events. We were doing 2, 3, 4,000. The park would book out for these events. It was massive. But after about a year and a half, a lot of the original guys had moved out, and I, even at such a young age in my career, I could see that I wasn't going to be able to grow to what I wanted to be there. So I moved out into the Hyatt in Sanctuary Cove and finished out my apprenticeship there with some really good chefs as well. I moved on from there to a hotel in Surfers Paradise, which wasn't a great idea. I was living, working and partying in Surfers at a young age. So that didn't last too long. I had some of my mates decided they wanted to move to Melbourne, and that sounded like a great idea. Big city, pursue, whatever we wanted to do down there. And that was my first sort of intro into what cooking and hospitality, I guess, really was. It was completely different to what I was experiencing on the Gold Coast. Mentality-wise, attitude-wise, it was something different, but it wasn't all good at the same time. There was a few restaurants that really didn't vibe with me, and it had me wondering if this was potentially the best career for me. I spent a bit of time thinking about it, and it was unfortunate. I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to do. I'd got a taste for it, and I just needed to find the right place. So I ended up working at a pub out in the outer suburbs for a little bit while I was trying to get my head together and my thoughts and work out what I wanted to do. And I ended up working with a chef, George. We're still very good mates today, 15 years later. Working with him it wasn't high-end food or anything like that, but it was all real food, where a lot of what I'd experienced on the Gold Coast, getting towards the end of my time there, was a lot of places starting to buy in the prepackaged things and whatnot. That wasn't why I was in it. I had no interest in that. So actually getting in there with George and starting to cook things from scratch again. I remember there was one point coming up to Christmas. We've been working together for 6 months or something, and the idea of building a gingerbread house, neither of us had done it before. So we both went home and we Googled, we found all this stuff, and we ended up building this insane monstrosity. It was spectacular. We have a gingerbread house. We'll back till 3 a.m. every day of the week, making all the little intricacies of it. And that's when I was really, okay, this is it. I need to find, I guess, my avenues here, and this is the career that I want to do.
How long did you spend in Melbourne for that stint?
I think it was about 5 or 6 years. I moved out of there into a restaurant called Rosati in the city. I wanted to sort of focus a little bit more on Italian cuisine. And I worked there with a chef called Darren, or as people know him as Fritters. He was ex-Giaccone's crew, one of the old school hard asses, but I got along with him very well. I learned a lot from him on how to be a leader. He was, that guy. He was there before everybody in the morning, setting up the section, side by side the entire way through service. And at the end of the night, he was the first one with a bucket of soapies to scrub down next to you. It was a very good experience on leadership working with him. At the end of my time there, I went back to the pub I'd worked at before. I was offered a head chef role there, and at a young age, I thought that's a good opportunity. I did it for about a year. Wasn't what I was after, so I went back to Darren and just asked for a bit of advice. He hooked me up with Harry Lille, who obviously ran Giaccone's for 10 years, very, very well-regarded chef, old school. And that was, so I went and worked for Harry at Town Hall Hotel. That was the place he owned in Fitzroy there. And that was another great experience. He sort of shaped my career, and not just Harry, but Luke, who was the sous chef there as well. But both of them helped shape my career. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to push in. And I guess I didn't know exactly what I wanted food to be for me. And Harry's style, obviously simple, traditional, that really, I guess, vibed with me. And I guess my more, what food is to me more with regards to gardening and having fresh produce and whatnot. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't overdo things. Just respect the ingredients. From there, I moved back to the Gold Coast for a little while. I wanted to spend some time with my family. And I ended up at Hellenica with Simon. And that was exactly the right place at exactly the right time for me. That was the first time I'd worked with open fire. We had the big char grill there, and I fell in love with that straight away. And that sort of led the next 10 years, I guess, of my career. Hellenica was fantastic. It's simple food, but it's all real. It's all made in house. It's all traditional. It's recipes from his mother, his auntie, his grandmother. And the passion of an owner like that, where at the time he was living in an apartment a street back from the restaurant. So we'd get in and Simon would be in the kitchen making himself lunch. And I've got to tell you, he can cook. He's a very good cook. It's inspirational when an owner can jump in the kitchen and cook like that, and without any experience. He's not trained. So I found that quite inspiring, and I really enjoyed working there. While I was there, Simon's family owns the Miami Marquetta on the Gold Coast, the night food markets. So I sort of had a bit of a chat with him. I was doing a lot of like American style wood fire smoking, briskets and whatnot, and I asked him if he could get me a stall there. So I was working full-time at Hellenica, and then on my days off I was doing 2 nights a week at Marquetta, that was a hell of an experience. I wasn't too smart about it. I wasn't doing pizzas or burgers or something that you could just rock up and make. There was 12-hour smoked brisket. I had to get in early and get all that done. And it was, there wasn't much sleep had for the 6 months that I did that.
Why did you do that? It sounds like you almost weren't sleeping.
I pretty much wasn't sleeping. It was, I wanted to do something for myself, for one, but also that's like the smoking. That's my hobby. That's was my main interest at that time. It's just one of many interests now. But I wanted to. I'd go out to the food markets and I'd be looking for a brisket and I couldn't find it. And I'd say, well, I can do a pretty good one. Why don't I jump in and do this? It was, I guess, an opportunity. And yeah, it was a bit of fun.
You rose the ranks at Hellenica to be head chef. What was it like taking on a role like that in a venue like that? Was it challenging?
No, it was exciting. I'd been there for a couple of years and I knew the ins and outs of the place. So it was actually pretty easy for me. There's not a lot that changes at Hellenica. So once you know everything there, the rest, it's just making sure you don't stuff it up. But yeah, it was an opportunity, I guess. That was my first head chef role in a proper restaurant. And I guess I pushed the guys to sort of lift the standards a little bit. Not that the standards were bad, but I wanted to do better. And I think that's important for every step you make. Every next step has to be better than your last, or you're just wasting time, in my opinion.
How did you end up back in Melbourne?
So I did 2 years as head chef at Hellenica, and then I spoke to Simon and said, I'm sort of a bit bored with this now. I need to do something different. So the idea was I was going to move back to Melbourne. He was actually on the cusp of opening SK in Brisbane. So he asked if I'd come and help with the opening of that, which sounded exciting. I hadn't done a restaurant opening at that stage. So yeah, I jumped on board with that, moved up. I think I did it for about 6 months. It wasn't, there were a few factors involved. It was a disgustingly hot summer in Brisbane and my partner's from Melbourne, so she wasn't really enjoying that. And yeah, there was a few factors and I just sort of said, I think this isn't, right for me at this stage. So we're going to move back to Melbourne. I had a few opportunities down there. But I tell you what, I could not have picked a worse time to have done it, because a week after I finished up at SK, the first lockdown was announced. So I had no job. I had 3 days to get out of my rental property before the new tenants were moving in. We weren't sure if we could cross borders to get down to Melbourne. Any jobs that I had potentially had lined up in Melbourne had disappeared. So we ended up moving into my dad's garage in Hervey Bay to see out the first lockdown.
Wow. How did you feel at that time?
Oh, it was pretty horrible. It's I'm not gonna go on about it too much. There's everybody had bad experiences. It was not ideal. We eventually, when the first lockdown came to an end, we quickly packed everything up and headed down. Got to Victoria. Everything was looking great. My partner had got into a job. I was finding it actually quite hard to lock in a job somewhere, which was very frustrating. And then I couldn't find work in restaurants. I was applying for factory jobs just to try and get something. And I'd got myself a job in a chocolate factory. And again, 2 days before I was due to start, they announced the second lockdown. So I got a phone call saying that job's not available anymore. And yeah, that was how that went for the next few weeks. I'd had a few conversations with Chris Lucas before about different things. And then just miraculously one day I got a phone call from his recruitment manager saying, hey, we've got an opportunity at Baby, our pizzeria in Richmond, if you're interested in some work. And it's not something that I would have chosen to do, but given the situation, I was so incredibly grateful to have anything. And yeah, I went in there and I did the best I could. I wanted to impress. And I guess I did a pretty good job of that, because at the end of it, he sort of sat me down and said, hey, I've got this Italian restaurant I'm going to open. Would you be interested? I was doing a lot of my wood smoking and whatnot during lockdowns. I was doing a lot of Instagram videos. He'd sort of seen that and said, I've seen you're into this wood fire cooking and whatnot. Would you be interested to bring that flair into this Italian restaurant? And that's where the idea of the open fire cooking for Grill Americano came from. Originally, it wasn't supposed to be a wood fire steak restaurant at all. So that was pretty cool to see, I guess, the evolution of that, and I guess parts of myself going into this restaurant that it turned into a monster almost immediately.
Yeah, and once it's the right word, and it made such a big impact when it landed as well. Take us inside there. Do you have any stories of what it was like, sort of running the team there?
It was it was wild. We couldn't find staff. Obviously, we just finished the last lockdown. I think we opened 3 months after the end of the last lockdown, and most chefs had either left Victoria or decided to leave the industry, and we had to rely very heavily on sponsors coming into the country. Which saved us, but at the same time, they didn't necessarily have the skills that we needed to do what we wanted to do. We wanted to take our time to train. Instead, everybody wanted to come all at once. We just got absolutely pummeled to begin with. There was, there was a lot of emotions. There was a lot of tears and whatnot getting that done, but we set it up. We got the processes in place. We got all the people trained that we needed to the standard that we needed to get the job done. And that was, I'll look back on that experience very fondly for a long time. That was a very big challenge, but I had a couple of key people around me that I'll, be in touch with for the rest of my life now, not the rest of my career, but we had Michaela, the Korean pastry chef, who her attention to detail is second to none. She's outstanding. I had Dan, who I'd worked with at SK and at Hellenica, and he wanted to come to Melbourne, so come with me on this journey, and he was back to back. We were through that together, and Simone, who was a young guy with stars in his eyes. He's going to be an amazing chef one day, but he really pushed through some adverse times, and that core unit of the four of us, it made a big difference. And not having that this time around for Naldham, it was very noticeable.
You mentioned you moved to Brisbane earlier this year for Naldham House. Tell us about that transition and leaving Grill Americano and taking the role. How did it come about, and was it hard to leave Melbourne?
Yes, it's hard to leave. I'd bought a house down there and I'd started setting it up. We sort of had plans for the long term, but at the same time, things had sort of become a little bit stagnant for me. Doing the same things day in, day out. That's not what I do this job for. I get rewarded from experiences, and doing the same thing every day, it becomes a bit mind numbing. So I had sort of put my hand up for some of the new projects they had coming up, and unfortunately that wasn't for me. They had other people in line for that. A few opportunities actually had crossed me, funnily enough, all in Brisbane. But this one for Naldham, it seemed like the right fit at the right time. So I had actually taken a week off to sort of do a bit of landscaping at home and consider what I wanted my next move to be. And literally at that time, these guys had reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're going to fly up to Brisbane. Come meet us. Let's have a chat." So, okay, I've got nothing to lose. So went up, had a chat, and they, took me for a tour through the building, which was still under construction at the time, or restoration. Obviously, it's an old heritage building, so there was a lot to do there. But it felt right. Everything, I clicked with the owners, the senior management. We all seemed to get along. The ideas seemed to be correct for what I wanted. When something like that, it just feels right. I kind of have to go with it.
A bit earlier on, you mentioned how at the moment you're just building the foundation with the menu and everything. Where do you want to take the brasserie and the food? What are your plans with it?
I guess for me, I want to keep learning as well. I've got some really good chefs in there at the moment who have different experiences to me. And we're all excited to sort of work with each other, where they can learn some things from me, I can learn some things from them. I do want to work seasonally. I want to work with producers. I know there's a fair bit around the Sunshine Coast and whatnot, and even down to the Tweed Valley. So that's sort of my goal over the next 12 months, is to actually get out and sort of meet some of these producers and try and work a bit more seasonally with the menu. That's something, obviously, my gardening background and whatnot, something that's very important to me.
How are you feeling at the moment? You kind of started to create a life in Melbourne and you've made the big move to Brisbane. Are you settled, and sort of is Brisbane sort of where you're going to be for a long period of time, do you think?
One thing I've learned in this industry is never to make plans. Things need to change very quickly. If someone had told me in March that I was going to be moving back to Brisbane, I would have laughed and said, "You're crazy." But sure enough, a month later, I was signing a contract to move to Brisbane. So it drives my partner a little bit crazy, no doubt. She wants to sort of settle down and whatnot. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible with this job. There's opportunities, and when a good opportunity comes about, if I'm not 100% satisfied where I am, I'm crazy not to take a good opportunity. I guess now with a young family, though, that's something I need to consider. Where am I going and how long am I going for? At the moment, we're here, we're in Brisbane, and this is where it feels right to be. And if things change in the future, we'll just play that when it comes about.
Well, Naldham House has only been open a few months now, but you're already making a big impact. What do you love about what you do? I guess
the day-to-day, challenges. This career in general, it plays into my ADD perfectly, and I guess that's why I sort of, why the industry is made up with a lot of people with that. It can take your focus from one thing to another instantaneously, and then back to something else. It's constantly moving. There's never really a dull moment, and that's, I guess, the exciting part and the part that keeps you going. It's when everything starts to become a bit, predictable and mundane. That's when the mind starts to wander.
Well, Doug, congratulations on what you're building up there in Brisbane. Look forward to seeing where you take it. Loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today. So please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.